Thank you, Guy, for the kind introduction, and thank you all for sticking this out for so long. It's been a marvelous evening last night and morning. I'm going to take a little bit different tack. When I turned 40, there was the usual birthday cake. But I think when you have a birthday, particularly a decade increment, it's also a good time to step back and reflect. And you celebrate your accomplishments, give yourself a hug, but I think it's also a good time to ask where you could do better, and particularly where you can do better in the future. And because I'm a big fan of Sesame Street, the slides with the red underlines at the top are good things. Everybody give themselves a hug. The slides with the black line at the top are places we can do better. And they're places where I think it's a good opportunity for us to pause and reflect a bit. So this looks at the role of human genetics in public health, really past, present, and future. And this slide has, in rather boring format, what I think are the fundamental contributions of human genetics to public health. First, is this fundamental recognition that the diseases of public health and significance have a substantial underlying genetic component. When I was a student in this field, everybody thought cardiovascular disease was attributable to a high-fat diet and smoking, and everybody thought that cancer was smoking and benzene in the atmosphere, for example. But I think we now realize that everything we do and the diseases that we suffer from, that important interaction between genes and environment. And now we're using that information to begin to think about how we can personalize medicine. And I don't really mean on the truly individual basis, but on the group basis, how we can identify subgroups of individuals and get the right drug into the right person and avoid those side effects that we fear. I think there's also a realization that we've co-evolved with the pathogens that give rise to infectious disease. And really the infectious disease burden that we see today is the result of a process, a long process. And we're leveraging that information to think about vaccine development strategies and treatments. And finally, and maybe most importantly, we've developed a sound appreciation for the diversity among us. And if you look at a group of individuals, and we have substantial genetic diversity among us, and really the vast amount of genetic diversity in the world is representative of diversity within a population. It's a very tiny difference of diversity between populations. And I'll say more about that, unfortunately, in a few minutes. So really, I think the most important thing is we've made our genomes and genomes more accessible to us all. We're all very comfortable now with this idea of genetics. And genetics is in art, and genetics is in cartoons, and genetics is at the grocery store. And there are protesters out in front of my grocery store about genetically modified foods. And genetics is now an important part of our life, everyday life, whether you're a geneticist or whether you happen to fix automobiles. Genetics is an integral part of all of our lives. And I think that's really the fundamental contribution and fundamental change over the last few years and decades. But I also think we haven't done enough as professionals to get the message out about the role and the importance of genetic diversity among us. That often when there's violence and when there's wars, it's the thorn or the catalyst is usually economic, whether it be diamonds, whether it be power, whether it be greed. But often the lines of fighting are along ethnic, racial, religious lines. And I really think as geneticists and epidemiologists, public health professionals, we need to get the message out. We have one planet, and we all share that genetic diversity. Whether you're white, black, green, purple, or brown, it's one population now. This is one planet. And this genetic diversity that we have is shared amongst us, all of us in this room. And fighting between whites and blacks or Hutus and Tutsis is really an artificial line. There's very small genetic differences. And we need to get that message out. War and violence, thank God, always give rise to peace. And this happens to be an actual photograph of the bomb shortly after the explosion in Nagasaki. And in 1946, Harry Truman signed documents and directed the Department of Navy, the Secretary of Navy, to launch a long-term study of the biologic and genetic effects of radiation. And he charged Jim Neal and then later William J. Shull, Jack Shull, to look at that, to launch this study. And Jack really developed most of what we know about the long-term effects of radiation. And when you go, the dosages you have from the dentist, for example, unfortunately, are from this experiment. Jack moved here in 1972 and formed what you know as the Human Genetics Center. And really, I want to show my great appreciation for what Jack has done, both for science here and for science at the School of Public Health, and for many of the people in this room. Towards the end of his active career, Jack still works many mornings, by the way. Towards the end of his active career here, he wrote this book, Song Among the Ruins, that I would hope many of us in this room already have read. If you have not, it's a wonderful glimpse into a person's career and a person's outlook on science and life. So the contributions of the Human Genetics Center are also, I think, equally fascinating. I really think our number one contribution is the seamless integration of genetics, epidemiology, and public health. We are the envy. Everyone in this room is the envy of schools of public health and universities throughout the world. We have, I think, well integrated human genetics into contemporary public health and into contemporary epidemiology. Other campuses have tried to do it, have formed units, and I think you all should be, I think, very proud of that accomplishment, of the seamless integration. The Human Genetics Center is not just a bunch of geeky biologists that you guys don't know, what they do. We are now an integral part of this school, and this school is now an integral part of us. I really think that we've probably done the most of any group to get across that the diseases that plague us today are the result of the history of our species, combined, again, with contemporary lifestyles. This idea that we evolved under a certain set of environmental influences, and then you put us today in a separate set of environmental influences, and we have what we call now an obesity or diabetes epidemic. We've had many firsts, I think, in science that we all should be proud of. Contributions in evolution and population variation, and the mathematical formulation of how genes evolve, how we evolve as a species. I already mentioned Jack's work on radiation, mutation, and cancer. We've had major contributions of looking at diabetes in Mexican Americans, and not just the genetics of diabetes, but really the epidemiology of chronic disease in Mexican Americans and border health. Equal contributions in inherited eye disorders, and more recently, I'm very pleased and proud of the work we're doing in birth defects. My own work in pharmacogenetics and cardiovascular disease has already been mentioned. And I think another first that you're going to hear about in the very near future is you all think that getting your DNA sequence is somehow science fiction, and it's not science fiction. It's here today. That this school and the Division of Epidemiology and the Human Genetics Center is going to be launching very soon, in fact a week and a half, the first ever population-wide sequencing of genomes and relating that genome sequences to health and disease. It's here. You read in the New York Times that someday you're all going to know your DNA sequence. Well, you're going to know it. You all will know it. And the question really is what we're going to do with it. But we've had failures. The three people on this slide I think are some of the smartest people I know. And I'm very proud to have worked with them. The person in the middle, I'll just use him as an example, Win-Chung Lee. When Win-Chung left, it hurt me a lot. So I'm a person who does better when I'm around people who are much smarter than I am, and Win-Chung is much smarter than I am. And I asked Win-Chung, why are you leaving? He's at the height of your career. And Wing Chung told me that he's accomplished a lot, but he wanted to be in the National Academy of Sciences. And the only way to get in the National Academy of Sciences was to leave Texas. And that's a sad statement. That's a very sad statement. And so I think we all of us, need to work much harder. Basically, the leaderships of the university, medical center in Texas need to do more to promote the science in the School of Public Health, promote the science in Houston, in Austin, in Dallas, and in Washington, really and around the world. We do outstanding science. Wing Chung basically was put in the National Academy less than a year after he left here. Okay, the future's bright. In fact, the future is very bright. There's never been a better time to be in public health. There's never been a better time to be in public health in Texas. I say here, and it's a quote, this is an actual quote from the New York Times, that someday in the not too distant future, we'll each know our DNA sequence, and this new information will be used to personalize medical therapy. So the challenge is, I think, for public health sciences is how we're going to use this to really improve human health. This is a very busy slide. I realize that the human genome, getting the first human genome sequence cost us about $3 billion, about $3.2 billion. The one in the middle I'll pick up to sequence Jim Watson cost about $2 million. You can now sequence a whole genome for about $5,000. So it's relatively inexpensive considering the amount of information you'll get, and you do get considerable information. This is my only data slide. It's from a publication in the New England Journal of Medicine. It was a collaboration with Helen Hobbs in Dallas, where we were looking at the far tails of LDL cholesterol in African Americans and identified mutations that give rise to very low cholesterol levels, very low LDL cholesterol levels. And these are very common, it turns out, in African Americans. And then go on to show what's shown on the blue line are people that don't have the mutation, those that do, the protective effect, the very low frequency of cardiovascular disease in those that contain the mutation. This information is being used both to identify individuals at decreased risk already, and I can tell you every large pharmaceutical company is now looking for inhibitors of this particular protein because you know by inhibiting the protein, or one knows by inhibiting this protein, two things. One, you'll reduce heart disease. And every pharmaceutical executive's dream is to know you've got a target now that doesn't have side effects. So these people are perfectly normal, except they're very protected from heart disease. But there is a reality check here. That this is a Science magazine, 1989. The cloning of the cystic fibrosis gene was heralded around the world as a major contribution. And the little boy on the front is a patient with cystic fibrosis. And the young man holding the magazine is that little boy. And I'm here to say today, he still has cystic fibrosis. And so by identifying the gene, gets you maybe on the cover of Rolling Stone or whatever your goal happens to be for the day, but it does not cure the disease. It may not improve human health, in fact. So I think each one of us, each day, must work to make this a better world. For all of us, for all of mankind. So when you make this discovery and you write the scientific publications, that's part of our career. But in fact, I think challenge us to ask the right questions, challenge us to take this data and make it a better world to live in by improving human health. And I really think the future is in the students, and that really shows maybe my age. The future really is in the young faculty and the postdoctoral fellows and the students that are in this room and in this building. And so I would again challenge all of us to raise our level of education, to challenge them to be the leaders, to challenge them to live each day to improve human health. So if you're inclined to clap for them, clap for each other, because I really have great admiration, appreciation for their work, and love for all of you. So thank you for this symposium. It's great. Thank you.